In this screencast, we're going to configure both Perl and PHP on Windows. First, I'm going to show you a Perl file, and the idea of this Perl file is that we're actually going to use it as a CGI, and we're going to access it through Internet Information Services. Now, to do that, we actually need to install Perl on IIS. So this is a Windows Server 2003 R2 64-bit computer, and I've downloaded the active Perl package from activestate.com, and they provide Perl on Windows, so it's just a matter of clicking through the wizard. By default they want to put it in the Perl 64 directory. Just means that any Perl scripts have to address that directory. This particular build of Active Perl is actually pretty good. In the past it was kind of difficult to set up Perl on Internet Information Services, and now I'd actually argue it's probably easier to set up Perl on IIS than it is to actually set it up on Linux, and I'll show you that in a later screencast. What I've just done there, I've created a CGI bin directory off the root internet public directory. I'm going to use that a little later to set up some script permissions. Now that Perl file I just showed you, I'm going to copy across to that CGI bin directory. In the background you can see that Perl's still installing. It's just setting up all of the dependencies in Internet Information Server. Script mapping is occurring there. Now, once this is installed, we actually have to go through, I'll just close this dialog here, we go through and we're going to have a look at Internet Information Services Manager to actually verify. You can see that the icon's now changed there because Perl's been mapped to it. Go to the Internet Information Services Manager and actually look at the web extensions and show ourselves that Perl has properly installed and properly set itself up as a web extension. This is a big improvement on, say, where it was in when Windows 2000 was around. I just turned that on, where there was a lot of manual mucking around that was necessary to get this working. What I'll do now is that CGI bin directory I just created manually, I'm actually going to map to a virtual directory. Just call it CGI bin. I'm going to set the path for files, obviously just browse to the directory I just created. And the whole point of doing this is that I'm setting up a special directory that I can allow script access in, so run scripts and execute. Generally I won't allow that around the site, so I have a special directory which I can lock down to allow that to go. And the final step with installing Perl is of course coming in and checking this, so I just go to the local host, CGI bin, Perl test, and if it doesn't throw an error you can see that Perl is working. Okay, so what that's done is the Perl script's actually generated a HTML file that's spat itself out through IIS. Okay, now what we're going to do here is PHP. PHP has in some ways become more popular than Perl because it's an easier language to work with, and a lot of web applications, especially in the open source community, are actually written using PHP. And one of the things I'm trying to demonstrate here is it's as easy to install these particular services and languages on IIS as it is, or even easier, to install them on Windows than it is on Linux. So that means there's a great amount of portability. You can write an application on Linux and move it across to Windows because you can run it essentially on both. What I'm going to do is set it up as a CGI rather than as an ASAPI module, just because that makes it a bit quicker. The setup wizard once it sets itself up. Again, this one configures IIS properly, and when IIS is configured, what it'll do, I'll show you again that it's configured. This one does the IIS configuration through a script, which just runs automatically there. Now that that's done, just close this wizard. Now that the wizard's closed, okay, what I'm going to do is just copy that and paste it into that CGI bin directory, because as you saw before, I'd set up the permissions of the CGI bin directory to allow scripts and executables to run. So just paste that there. What we'll do is we'll then come back and we'll actually check Internet Information Services to verify that the appropriate extensions have been installed. As you can see there, not only has Perl been installed, it's actually been enabled. So the final test is of course to connect to IIS through a browser and verify that this actually works. So it's in the CGI bin directory like the Perl test was. This is PHP test. Hit enter, load it up, and you can see that PHP has installed correctly. And that's all there is to the basics of installing PHP and Perl on Internet Information Services.